Hey everybody, this is Zachary Jeans. Let's keep walking through the Bible. So today is episode 477 and we are beginning a new book. Probably be here for a few episodes. It is the book of Esther. Esther is a unique book in that it is not referenced by anything in the New Testament. It doesn't get referenced by Jesus or any of the apostles or just nothing, no references. And it also represents a special book in that sense that it is the only time period between the returning to Jerusalem with Zerubbabel and all that, 515 BC or so, and then you have Esther happening in the first half of the 5th century, so like the 480s, 470s, that sort of range. And some people think that it was actually written shortly thereafter, say 465. And then there are others that think maybe it got, it was an oral tradition of sorts, and it got written down by the Maccabean period, in the first 100 years BC. I tend to think that these things get written down and then they get shelved and then picked back up again, especially some of the older books, like Job, and possibly Esther being another example, but we just don't know. At least I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at on my research. And but just needless to say, this is when the Medes, the Persians, were in control. They'd taken over, conquered the Chaldeans, and Jerusalem has been occupied, and yet there's still this sort of rule going on that the people of Israel aren't all back in Israel. So that's what's going on with Esther. Her and the people, the Jewish people, are still, not all of them have gone back. Just want to start by saying thank you. Thanks for praying. Thanks for going along with me. And I just appreciate your prayers. So if you could, hit that like button, heart, whatever it is, and share. Clip this out. Go to YouTube. I'll leave a link to the sermon there and the playlist, and you're welcome to clip out clips and share privately. And that's always an option as well. So, all right, well, enough of this and that. We're going to start Esther here, but why don't we start with prayer? Lord, I love you. God, thanks for your word. God, thank you for Esther and her story, and that the Jewish people to this day celebrate Purim, God, in honor of this, a brave young woman and the people who stood with her. And Lord, we love you, and we just praise you and thank you for your people, your Jewish children and your people of faith, your children of faith. And God, we just pray, God, that you will strike down the anti-Semitic heart and turn people away from hate and turn them towards love. God, we just ask that in your holy name, Jesus. Amen. Yeah, this book is a good book, and kind of catching a whiff of what anti-Semitism is, or a hatred of the Jewish people. Haman is the character which, embodies that for a culture and a people that were rejecting the Jewish people who were there in Persia at the time. And we're going to see that unfold over this. And we're also going to see how God delivers. So, all right. Why don't we pick it up? Chapter 1, verse 1 of Esther. And of course, always you can go to esv.org and pull up Esther chapter 1, verse 1 and hit that audio button, and you'll have an audio version of the chapters that we're going to read. I think we're going to go for the first 3. We'll see where we end up. All right. Now in the days of Ahasuerus, the Ahasuerus who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces. In those days when King Ahasuerus sat in his royal throne in Susa, the citadel, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a feast for all of his officials and servants. Now, this Ahasuerus, this is also known by the Greeks as Xerxes. Yeah, that's Xerxes. And this guy reigned a huge, huge kingdom. From India to Ethiopia, butting up there into Turkey, clearly controlled the area of Israel. 127 provinces. And this is happening in like 485, 475, kind of in that range, BC. So I'm going to refer to him as King Xerxes because you'll recognize that name in history a little bit better. So anyway, he's throwing a big feast, right? And the army of Persia and Media, the nobles, the governors, the provinces, they were all before him, while he showed the riches of his royal glory and the splendor and pomp of his greatness for many days, 180 days. That's a long, long celebration. But it just goes to show you how much wealth had been collected over the decades, but really going back to the wealth that had been captured under Nebuchadnezzar and his sons in their reign, and then eventually taken over by the Persians. So this is a pulling together of a lot of resources, and now there's a celebration that lasts 180 days. And when these days were completed, the king gave for all the people present in Susa, the citadel, both great and small, a feast lasting for 7 days in the court of the garden. So now it opened the doors for a full week to every person. Didn't matter if you're rich, poor, middle class, didn't matter. Everybody was invited to that. There were white cotton curtains and violet hangings fastened with cords of fine linen, purple to silver rods, marble pillars, and also couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and precious stones. Drinks were served in golden vessels of different kinds, and royal wine was lavished according to the bounty of the king. And drinking according to this edict, there is no compulsion. For the king had given orders to all the staff of his palace to do as each man desired. You have a situation where it's sort of like, you do you, boo. Live and let live. A lot of times with these kings, and we're going to see it with Vashti, his queen, he's going to make a demand. And you're going to see the juxtaposition here. 180 days, officials, nobles, they get a party. They get to hang out. You can drink, not drink. Nobody's going to be mad at you. Nobody's getting side-eye by a royal court official like, oh, you're not having a good enough time. Drink up, buddy. No, everybody's allowed to kind of enjoy themselves the way that they're comfortable with. But now we have a situation. For the king had given orders to all his staff of his palace to do as each man desired. Queen Vashti also gave a feast for the women in the palace that belonged to King Xerxes. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbonah, Bigtha, Agabatha, Abagatha, Zethar, and Carcass, the 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of King Xerxes, to bring Queen Vashti before the king with her royal crown, and the princes her beauty, for she was lovely to look at. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command, delivered by the eunuchs. At this, the king became enraged, and his anger burned within him. So we got a problem, makes an edict, there's no compulsion. The king said, given orders to all the staff of his palace to do as each man desired. Queen Vashti is also having a feast. And the king commands, hey, I want you to come on out over here. And she's like, no, I'm good. I'm going to hang out here. Remember that whole, do as you please? Well, this just burns the king. He hasn't asked for anything. He hasn't asked for anybody to do anything or be anything more than they need to be in his feast. He's not like, you have to drink this much or that much. He's like, you can hang out, you can party how you want. I'm just asking my queen, will you come on over? And she's like, no. The king said to the wise men who knew the times, for this was the king's procedure toward all who were versed in law and judgment, the men next to him, and the 7 princes of Persia and Media, who saw the king's face and sat first in the kingdom. And they said, according to the law, what is to be done to the queen Vashti, because she has not performed the command of the king delivered by the eunuchs? Well, they said, not only against the king has Queen Vashti done wrong, but also against all the officials and all the people who are in all the provinces of King Xerxes. For the queen's behavior will be made known to all women, causing them to look at their husbands with contempt. Since they will say, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, and she didn't come. This very day, the noble women of Persia and Media who have heard of the queen's behavior will say the same to all the king's officials. There will be contempt and wrath and plenty. I mean, it's just plain on the nose. It's right in your face. They're like, hey, you can't have your queen telling you no, because it's one thing that she's doing this to you, man. But now this is going to become like a precedent, and, you know, all of our wives are going to basically tell us to go pound sand if we ask them to be here or do something or come be with us. And at the time, these officials thought that was not a great thing. Now, it's interesting. There is a line of respect in marriage. You know, whether my wife asks me to be somewhere or do something or be with her, and vice versa. If I ask, you know, Heather, I need you to be here. I need you to be with me in this situation. You know, we respect one another and we honor one another, if at all possible, you know, that we can. And so the idea that she's disrespecting her husband in this way, first and foremost, it's not really about all these officials and setting some precedent for these guys. That's what they're worried about. I think that the important thing is just that in a marriage, you kind of got to have that give and take. Like, hey, I need you. Can you be here for me? And in marriage, we drop what we're doing. We take the hit and we're like, yeah, you know what? You need me? I'm there. You know, we say all those vows for better or for worse, health and sickness, you know. We like all the ones on the for better and for health and for wealth and when things are great. But then we kind of get to the parts where it's somebody's sick or somebody needs help or somebody's, you know, hurt, needs time, you know, all that. Well, that's what marriage is. So don't get me wrong. I'm not taking a hardcore, you know, view saying that Queen Vashti, you know, and I'm against, you know, women's rights or anything. That's not what this is about. I think just in marriage, it probably would have been wiser for any of us, like if our spouse needs us, to come be near. Now, I know there are 1,000 women's studies on Esther. If there's a book that gets studied in women's Bible study, it's Esther. And I know one of the important angles here that's emphasized is that he wanted to show her off as a trophy. He wasn't calling her because he really just wanted to spend time with her and valued her presence. He's just like, hey, everybody, I want you to see my, you know, smoking hot wife. And it's clear there when you see that, you know, she was beautiful, and she would be beautiful in front of all the princes. He was going to show her off. So in that sense, yeah, totally wrong. As applied to our relationships, yeah, if you just want to show off your spouse, you know, or your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, you know, at a party, like some sort of, you know, class reunion, you go, you know, date somebody or hire a call guy or a call girl, and, show up and you're like, oh yeah, this is my spouse, or this is my girlfriend, and it's, you're basically just renting out a relationship to look good. That, all of that's all for the world. That's all not what a godly relationship is about. And honestly, this isn't a godly relationship, but as it applies to us in our lives, when we need our spouses to be there for us, we need them to be there for us. And God help me. I want to be there for my wife, and may my wife always want to be there for me. And yeah. So anyway, these guys are worried about, hey, if the queen said this to you, king, who's rocking and rolling and ruling like 127 provinces, and you're known as far away as, the far west, Greece and all that. Well, I think we need you to do something about this, because this could trickle down and spread to all of our relationships. So when the decree made by the king is proclaimed throughout all the kingdom, this is what they're suggesting. For it is vast, all women will give honor to their husbands, high and low alike. The advice pleased the king and the princes, and the king did as was proposed. He sent letters to all the royal provinces, to every province in his own script, every people in their own language, every man be master of his house, and speak according to the language of his people. So they just put it down and just said, you know what, you better respect the man. Obviously, this is a little harsh. It's an understatement. It's kind of a harsh way to demand respect. In a home, hopefully, there is leadership. I think that marriages go sideways because there isn't a hierarchy. I think the Bible does teach that in a godly biblical marriage, the man is the head of the household, and he loves his wife and has equality with her as a child of God, and serves and loves her just as he would serve and love the Lord. But when it comes down to a final decision on something, after all the opinions have been expressed and heard, I think the Bible teaches that it's not on a democratic vote of the husband, the mom, and the kids to all vote, and that's what they do. That is the husband abdicating his leadership role and responsibility, and it actually throws an imbalance over time in the home, because the home doesn't know where the leadership is. And hopefully the husband is following the Lord and submitting himself to the Lord, and not leading inappropriately or leading out of selfishness, but selflessness. And this is a lesson that, I have to learn over and over. And guys, this isn't an opportunity for you to just rule your home with some sort of dictator, mode. This isn't you like slamming your fist down like the king here. But this is godly leadership, that you are willing to take the responsibility for those decisions, and you're willing to make sure that you listen and hear your family and where they're at, and then serve and love them the way that they need to be loved and served. And if you have to make a hard decision, you explain why you think that this is a hard decision and why you got to do it, and they'd be willing to take that step forward. Okay? So I think that is a godly means of leadership in the home. Okay, chapter 2. So after these things, when the anger of King Xerxes had abated, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what he had been decreed against her. The king's young men who attended him said, "Let beautiful young virgins be brought out for the king. Let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom. Gather all the beautiful young virgins to the harem in Susa, the citadel," because Queen Vashti had been put away. She'd been put on the shelf. Not killed, not removed in the sense that, she doesn't exist, but you know what? I'm just not going to hang out with you anymore. So he's feeling lonely. So they gathered together all these beautiful, beautiful women. And in verse 5 it says, now there was a Jew in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives carried away when Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away. He was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, the daughter of his uncle, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at. And when her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. She is a beautiful young woman. Just to remember that Esther's first and foremost, her Jewish name was Hadassah. Mordecai took her as his own daughter and took care of her. And you think about living in exile, and family takes care of family. Family takes care of family. So when the king's order and the edict were proclaimed, when many young women were gathered in Susa, the citadel, in custody of Haggai, Esther also was taken into the king's palace and put in custody of Haggai, who had charge of the women. And the young woman pleased him. The young woman pleased him and won his favor. And he quickly provided her with cosmetics and her portion of food, and with 7 chosen young women from the king's palace, and advanced her and her young women to the best place in the harem. Esther had not made known her people or kindred, for Mordecai had commanded her not to make it known. And every day Mordecai walked in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and what was happening to her. So, the Jewish people weren't without their enemies in the land of the Medes and Persians. And Mordecai said, you know what? Just keep it on the down low. As Christians, there are times when we keep our faith or our identity as Christians on the down low. You can live in a closed country. And it's not that you won't share your faith, but you have to pick and choose your spots. Otherwise, you're not going to be around very long. In a place like Portland, you can be fairly open about your faith, but there are many contexts where your faith is not welcome. I can tell you just driving my car doing Lyft, like if I was to just play worship music and, have a, I love Jesus sticker on my car, well, my car would be smashed in with baseball bats at some point, and I'd be threatened and assaulted and accused of all kinds of things, on my driver app. Not because I did anything, but because there is that much disdain by a certain segment of the population that they would seek that out. So I look for opportunities. I don't hide my faith, but there are times when it's just not on a bumper sticker on my forehead. And I hate that, but it's just like, if they see anything in my car that suggests that my app could get shut down. And you're like, why? How would that happen? Well, like Esther, people have opinions, and it doesn't matter if she did well or did, okay. They would accuse her of all kinds of things to get her kicked out. And in the same way, I know because I've gotten really negative kickback in sort of a public-facing job. Now, I get it. Look, for my Christian friends, you're like, you should be able to play your worship music whenever you're... Well, okay, you get in the car. Do you want to listen to, a new age, cultic, religious person evangelize you in the car and play their music and talk about transcendental meditation with you? Or do you want a Muslim man to basically tell you that, that Muhammad is the one true prophet, and if you don't, honor Allah and follow Muhammad, then, they're going to take action against you, whether it's physical or something else? Of course you don't. And you'd be like, that has no place in some sort of service business. And so I take that to the case where, like, I also don't put my faith as a part and parcel of my job. But in the context and course of conversation, if somebody wants to go deeper on things of the Lord, and I recognize an openness to it, then I'll talk to them about it. But Mordecai's word to her is like, hey, we're in a closed country here of sorts. You got to keep your identity kind of on the down low here, and just, you know, keep your head down, do your work as unto the Lord, basically. So when the turn came, verse 12, for each young woman to go into King Xerxes after being 12 months under the regulations for the women, since this was the regular period of their beautifying, 6 months with oil and myrrh and 6 months with spices and ointments for women. When the young woman went into the king in this way, she was given whatever she desired to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening she would go in, and in the morning she would return to the second harem in the custody of Xerxes, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. She would not go in to the king again unless the king delighted in her and she was summoned by name. So this guy was sleeping with a new woman every night who had spent an entire year elevated into this level of the harem, where then she was then given 6 months of this kind of ointments and this 6 more months of this kind of perfumes, till she was absolutely at the peak of perfection, and then delivered to the king for a night of pleasure. And then once that night was concluded, she was passed into the second harem, so that there wasn't a chance that she'd be brought back a second time, unless, of course, he was like, hey, that was a really pleasurable evening. I would like so-and-so again. I know, and you're like, that is just disgusting. But this is how he rolled, and this is how a lot of guys, and for that matter, women think. You know, I drive around and I pick up people who are either ordering a companion for the evening or selling themselves as a companion for the evening, whether that's for actual sexual acts and prostitution, or if it's just something to look at up on stage. So you would be shocked, maybe you wouldn't, but that goes on to a degree that, like, I don't think the average person would believe. It is so pervasive, and I see a lot of it, but I don't even see. I'm sure I'm missing a massive amount of what's actually going on. But yeah, the desire for sexual companionship is huge, and the desire to have sort of that no strings attached, guiltless experience is what so many people desire. The problem is Paul tells us, you know, when somebody sleeps with, say, a prostitute, their souls, believe it or not, are intertwined. There's a tying together of the substance of our souls every time that we have a sexual encounter. You might scoff at that, but that's what Paul says. And when we pull apart from that relationship, and it's pulled apart, there's the feelings, the external feelings of, oh, I don't have that relationship, the chemical, emotional reaction, but there's an internal spiritual tearing, and there's a scarring, and it's something you can't see, but it begins to express itself over time, a hardening of the heart, hardening of the soul, as that soul mends itself to another sexual partner and then rips, tears in this very crazy spiritual way, and then it's going to scar, and then it becomes harder and harder. This guy, King Xerxes, Ahasuerus, is sleeping with a new woman every night, King Solomon style. And it's just got, I mean, his soul has got to be torn and scarred in ways that are just hard to fathom. I want you to know that if you live that life, look, God loves you and God can heal you. In this life, you can have healing. turn your heart over to Jesus. Give him your scarred, torn soul and say, God, I'm not good. You are. Please forgive me. I trust you, Jesus, and he will forgive you and start to heal you. Will you fully ever be healed on this side of heaven of those scars? Probably not. Probably not. I'm sorry to say that. You'll probably experience some hardness of heart and hardness of your soul that God will work on, and you'll be softened over time as you draw near to the Lord and you experience healing, and you can have a healthy relationship. I know tons of people over the decades that have been divorced or have had active sexual lives that have gotten into a great one-on-one relationship with the Lord and with a spouse, and they have healed. I'm not saying that that's not possible, but I think that everyone would admit that there is some damage that's done from that life. And so I would always advise you not to go down that path if you can at all choose to only have one sexual partner. But if you have had it, there is healing. It's just, I think you will have sort of a sober, view that there's kind of a scarring there, kind of a scarring. So anyway, that's for everybody to deal with as they would deal with. But I just want you to know that this isn't cause for Jesus not to forgive you. This is every reason why you need Jesus. This is everything that Jesus is there to die and bleed on a cross and take all of your suffering and all of your sin, everything on himself, die and raise from the dead so that your sin goes down and dies with him in that grave. And when he's resurrected, your faith is also that which is resurrected in him, and you are made new. And when you get to the other side of this life, into a new heaven and a new earth, you are going to have a wholly healed self, a body, mind, and soul. Everything will be made new. Okay? So when the turn came for Esther, daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his own daughter to go into the king, she asked for nothing except what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who had charge of the women, advised. She said, what should I take? Ask the guy who knows, right? And when Esther was taken to the king into his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign, the king loved Esther more than all the women, and she won grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. That was one heck of a night. The king gave a great feast for all his officials and servants. It was Esther's feast. He also granted a remission of taxes to the provinces and gave gifts with royal generosity. Now, when the virgins were gathered together the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, and Esther had not made known her kindred or her people, as Mordecai had commanded her. For Esther obeyed Mordecai just as when she was brought up by him. In those days, as Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold became angry and sought to lay hands on King Xerxes. And this came to the knowledge of Mordecai, and he told it to Queen Esther. And Esther told the king in the name of Mordecai. When the affair was investigated and found to be so, the men both hanged in the gallows. They committed treason, and it was recorded in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. So now not only has she pleased the king in the bedroom, but shortly thereafter, after being made queen in Vashti's place, her uncle, she maintained that family relationship, discovered a couple of his eunuchs were going to try and do the king wrong. And Mordecai passed the word to her, and she passes the word to the king. It gets investigated, proves to be true. These guys are taken care of. So she's earned his trust in the bedroom and earned his trust in the king's court. in terms of the affairs of the court. She is in a very high place of trust now. She has protected his life and been in his most intimate presence. Now, you can see how some of this is all wonky, right? We don't have king-queen relationships, but I do want to suggest this to you. When you see your wife, and I love John Piper for pointing this out in a sermon series in Romans chapter 5. He's like, when you see your spouse, men, when you see your wife, you are looking at a queen. You are looking at a princess, a queen in the kingdom of God. We're going to be kings and queens in the next heaven and earth, the Bible says. We're going to be in places of authority and rulership. So just when you see her, don't see her as anything less than a would-be queen, a princess of the Lord. And vice versa. Women, don't see your husband as anything less than God's precious son, as somebody who is going to rule and reign in a new heaven and new earth in ways that we can't totally fathom. Somebody deserving of honor and respect. We trust one another in the bedroom in marriage, and we trust one another in the court of public interaction. And we got each other's back. That's marriage. And we can draw that from Esther. We can draw that from her relationship with the king. And we can also draw the fact that, when family needs help, we do what we can to help. Mordecai took on a responsibility. It wasn't his. And he took care of Hadassah. That's Esther. All right. Well, hey, until next time, we'll be on episode 478. We'll be picking up chapter 3 and 4, possibly 5. We'll see. But until next time, wherever you're at in your marriage, wherever you're at in your faith, turn to Jesus and keep walking, okay? God bless you. Bye-bye.